welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the State of Competitive Intelligence in 2023. My name is Connor. I'm on the content team here at Crayon, and I am joined today. I'm very happy today to be joined by Mimi and August, who run competitive intelligence at Akamai and Deltek, respectively. I am also joined today by Sheila Lehar, who is our Senior Director of Content here at Crayon. She will be monitoring the Q&A section. So periodically throughout today's session, I'll throw it over to Sheila, and she'll chime in with some questions that we're getting from all of you. So please, throughout this session, any questions that come to mind, please put them in that Q&A section, and if it aligns with what we're talking about, we'll discuss it in real time, and then we also have some time set aside at the end for questions that we aren't able to get to. We also have a poll question that we will push live in just a minute. But first, before I get to today's agenda, Mimi and August, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Connor.
So, like I said, super simple agenda for our time together today. In not even 2 minutes, I will just quickly give some background on the state of competitive intelligence in case anyone is not familiar with what it is. And then for the majority of our time together today, we will be walking through the top 5 insights from the latest edition of the State of CI, the 2023 edition. And for each of those insights, we have a discussion question. And those discussion questions will drive most of our conversation, plus, again, the extra questions that you all put in that Q&A section. And then, like I said, time permitting, if there will definitely be questions that we don't get to, and that's how we will wrap up our time together today. Just one slide of background. Crayon State of Competitive Intelligence was launched originally in 2018. So if you're familiar with HubSpot's State of Marketing or Salesforce's State of Sales, that Crayon has the State of Competitive Intelligence, of course. So we've published a new edition every year since 2018. The latest edition, the 2023 edition, is number 6, and it's based on a survey of more than 900 competitive intelligence leaders like Mimi and August, as well as stakeholders, folks like sales reps and CSMs and other folks who use competitive intelligence throughout their day-to-day. And since the very beginning, the goal of State of CI has never changed. The goal is to be the source of truth for anyone out there who wants to know why and how companies invest in competitive intelligence programs. So that's the State of CI. At the end, we'll give a shout out to the report itself, so you all know where to get it, so you can go download it if you haven't already. And yeah, like I said, the most of our time today will be spent walking through the top 5 insights. But first, we do have a poll. Caitlin is going to set that live. So what is the biggest roadblock keeping you from driving adoption of competitive intelligence or usage? You can see you have 3 options there and an other. So if you could all just take a few seconds to answer that poll question. Cool. So it looks like with almost half of the poll respondents, the biggest roadblock is stakeholders don't fully understand the value of CI. And then it's close between my stakeholders have trouble finding CI and other, and then only a few folks said that their stakeholders are unaware that CI is available to them. So before we get into our top 5 insights, August and Mimi, I'm just curious if you're all at all surprised by the results of that poll. Nope.
I'm not actually, and I was glad to see it because the awareness piece is for when you're starting out, and it sounds like, at least for the majority of folks who are on this call, they made it really clear to the folks that they work with, right, that they're available and people can find them. I think it's the value piece is longer term and a little bit more difficult, so definitely not surprised by it.
And something that constantly needs to be refreshed as well, with new stakeholders, new understandings of what competitive intelligence is able to do in different scenarios that they're facing. And sometimes a stakeholder may not even realize there's value that competitive intelligence can deliver in a particular situation. And so sometimes they don't ask.
Gotcha. Well, thank you both for the, I know that wasn't prepared. So thank you for the quick reactions to that. So like I said, most of our time today will be spent discussing the top 5 insights from the State of CI. So the question we ask here, all of the CI leaders who took the State of CI survey, we asked them, what percentage of their opportunities are competitive. And as you can see, for the average B2B software company, based on those responses, 2/3, 66% of deals are competitive. So our discussion question for this first insight for Mimi and August is, how do you get sales reps to adopt the competitive insights that you share with them. Mimi, would you mind sort of kicking us off on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, August and I had a very similar reaction, which is road showing CI and the things that are available to not just the sales team, but all of the other teams you work with. It's not a one and done, right? It's a constant evolution, constant dialogue, reminding people to either adopt new behaviors or reinforce behaviors. That's something that is a constant for CI leaders and CI teams. So if you want adoption, if you want usage, you have to have that story, and you have to tell it over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely agree. We found definitively that repetition is your friend, that whether it's awareness of a particular resource that they can apply or specific insights, for example, let's say how to handle traps that a leading competitor may set for you, that getting out in front of a sales force again and again continually reinforces that knowledge and that awareness of those resources. And between turnover in a sales force and let's say maybe some people learn things different ways and just the fallibility of human memory, and just to reinforcement and repetition are your friends.
So if I heard you correctly there, August, so you're saying that you will not only reinforce, hey, we have this battle card on this competitor. It sounds like you'll even go a level deeper and sometimes just focus on specific content within that single battle. Did I hear that right?
Yes, absolutely. We will host sessions and engage individual account teams sometimes on specific sections of our battle card, for example, because we're seeing that they have a need or a requirement at a particular stage in the sales cycle, or with a particular competitor that maybe is setting a trap that should not be as effective as it's proving to be. And
Gotcha.
we spend some time on those specific reinforcing those specific activities.
Is that something that you will do as well, Mimi? Sometimes is go one level deeper beyond just here's how to sell against this competitor, and even go here's how to sell against this competitor in this scenario or when they set this trap. Is that something you've done as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And every context, every deal is different. And so we try to tailor it when we have the time. And even when we're sharing battle card content, right, when the request is specific enough, sometimes it's very, very general. So we just, send the whole thing. If someone is looking for objection handling, right, we go to that tile and we link to that specific piece because that's the specific thing that they're looking for. I think a little bit of that white glove service, right, to a rep and just kind of handing them exactly what they're looking for, it helps, right, bring that goodwill that you need, right, in terms of what CI can offer and the usability of the product. That's important.
Gotcha. So for the folks out there who well, for everyone, but specifically those folks, those the half or so who said that their biggest roadblock is getting their stakeholders to understand the value of CI. It sounds like if there's one thing they can do coming out of today, it's make themselves more visible and over communicate. It sounds like. Is there anything else, again, for someone who assume that at this point they haven't really done anything to drive home the value of CI? Is there anything beyond showing up and over communicating that you would recommend to those folks? To make it more specific, why don't we focus on sellers in particular? Do you have any thoughts there, August?
I like the over communication framing because for you it will feel like you are over communicating. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying the same thing to them the third time this month, that sort of thing. But you're also over indexing on how much people have listened to you the first two times you may have presented something. And I like Mimi's point too about the specificity, that every opportunity is different, and being able to make, for example, a battle card or some other competitive asset real in exactly the situation that an account team or a team of sellers might be facing, demonstrates for them the value of what competitive intelligence is, and kind of helps them connect the dots between, let's say, a general competitive intelligence asset and their specific situation as well.
Anything you add there, Mimi, in addition to over communicating? Any other tips for folks who need help showing the value of CI to their stakeholders?
I think you might want to kind of create that virtuous cycle, which is if you've had enough time, momentum, and usage of certain reps, maybe not the entire field, reach out to those reps and kind of do a little bit of a review or get feedback, right? Here's a battle card. These are the components. Is it actually helpful? Is it useful? What is it that you and your team need that we don't have? And then it just shows that you're continuously refining the product, and also taking in the feedback and kind of trying to deliver something that they're looking for. Obviously, if you're just starting out, you might not be able to get that type of reaction, but if you're at a point where there's enough battle cards, enough usage for you to actually reach out to folks, I would recommend doing that.
Finding your champions, right? Champions are so important. I don't know if Carolyn Klinger is here. Carolyn, if you're here, hi. But Carolyn runs marketing competitive intelligence at Affinity. And she, almost a year ago at one point, we were talking about win-loss, and she said that one of the most important things for folks who are running CI is to find ways to influence without necessarily having authority, right? And I think to your point, Mimi, reaching out to those sellers who are using the content and finding ways to maybe work with them, that's one way. In the absence of authority, you can maybe hopefully start to influence the folks who aren't using CI.
Yeah, that's so funny. Just to chime in, we ran a workshop with an analyst firm, and when they found out that I was a sponsor in CI, she said, "Oh, I used to do CI. They have no power, no influence, and no money. It's a really hard job." And I was like, "Thank you, thank you for understanding." So absolutely, where you can find influence, where you can find champions, you got to do it. Absolutely.
And on the over communication thing, before I throw it to Sheila for some questions, definitely relatable for myself as a content marketer, because the way you have to think of it is if you publish some amazing new piece of content, say the state of competitive intelligence, you wouldn't just send one email and then because to August's point, you have to assume that, yeah, most people they're not going to notice it or they'll forget. So think like a marketer, I guess, in these situations. You gotta, it's going to take a few tries to get the message across. So before we move on to our next insight, Sheila, do we have any questions that are on this topic for August and Mimi to discuss?
Yeah, I just have one question that came in that I think might be helpful. So someone's curious if you're sort of starting out and kind of new to owning the competitive intelligence program. Obviously, over communicating is really effective, but even getting really tactical here, like what cadence do you both set in terms of like when you're getting in front of your sales teams? Is it monthly, weekly, daily? Like, do you have sort of set meetings that you're going to? Just curious to get kind of in the weeds of your programs there in terms of getting in front of the sales team.
Well, for us, it's a combination of set and let's say ad hoc opportunities to get in front of our sellers. So we do have a monthly engagement with everyone in the organization. It's primarily attended by sales, and that's our opportunity to provide our most important competitive updates from the last month. We usually do a deep dive on some particular topic, whether that's a competitor or a product. And then finally, we provide some sort of competitive intelligence upskilling as well. We recognize that others inside of the business are doing their own competitive intelligence in varying forms. We want them to be able to do that ethically, effectively, those sorts of things. So we actually teach them how to do their own competitive intelligence. And amongst the many things we do, this coming Thursday, our webinar is actually a reintroduction to Crayon as a competitive intelligence resource for everybody inside of our business. So that's a regular thing we do on a monthly basis. We have a regular cadence with specific sales teams and product teams inside of the business as well. Some of those are as frequently as every week. Most of them are monthly also. And then we do occasionally, when something of significance or importance happens, convene the appropriate stakeholders inside of the business for something that's kind of outside of the step of what we do on a regular basis.
Got it. Anything you would add to that, Mimi, in terms of the cadence and what you're doing over at Akamai?
Sure. I'm super impressed by August's program. We're not quite as mature in that front, simply because we have a very large dispersed sales force. So we've opted not to hold our own meetings just because there's so many meetings, right, for that those teams have to attend. What we did, especially early on as we were introducing Crayon, was get on the agenda of the chief sales officers, QBRs, and all hands meetings. Then we would kind of draft off of that and attend the regional geo leads monthlies as well. And now that we're a little bit more established, it's more on an ad hoc basis where we get in front of teams based on requirements or issues that they're seeing in their pipeline that they would like help on. Because again, there's about 4,000 sellers around the world. It's kind of hard for us to plug in. It's been a challenge actually for us to get in front of literally everybody outside of, again, that all hands event, which happens on a quarterly basis. What we typically do is more of the ad hoc communications. We have a WebEx. We use WebEx, so we have a channel dedicated to competitive, and that's where we actually push out a lot of information. And that's been a pretty valuable resource for us to keep people in the know.
I mean, I think your detail about getting into the meetings of the sales organization, that's a detail I skimmed over. And most of those monthly meetings or the weekly meetings that I talked about are actually the appropriate member of the market and competitive intelligence team engaging in those meetings. So I don't want to oversell the maturity of our program here, because we do limit ourselves to that one monthly meeting that we host, because we're in a similar situation. There are so many meetings inside of the modern organization.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's all we got for now, Connor.
Thank you, Sheila. Cool. So we will move on to top insight number 2. So as you can see here, nearly half of the CI leaders who took our survey this year said they are not doing win-loss analysis. So starting with you, Mimi, I'd love to hear from both of you. If you could just share a little bit about your experiences with win-loss analysis and maybe a lesson or two that you've learned along the way.
Sure. Win-loss is very, very tricky. I'd be interested to hear the experiences of folks listening in. So previously I headed up competitive intelligence at HubSpot, and we ran win-loss with a third-party vendor. We would source lost customers, and they would reach out, interview, summarize, all of that good stuff. It was really, really effective. It was reported out to leadership, really successful program. It was something that we wanted to do at Akamai. Same vendor, same process, really hard connect rates. We never ended up getting the volume that we needed to adequately get insights. And so, that was definitely a learning that maybe, especially as I was tasked on building a competitive program, which included win-loss, that we didn't have to go full throttle and go for the nirvana state, which is talking to lost customers. And so my team has kind of backed up a little bit and started internally. So win-loss is not just talking to churned customers. It's also you can have interviews and have conversations with the reps that lost those customers to get those learnings as a starting point. And so we found success in being able to grab those stories, put that in our battle cards so that others can learn from those lessons and move from there. But that's really the state of win-loss in terms of a formal program here at Akamai. We also use our Salesforce data for win-loss analysis, which is another component of it as well.
Gotcha. Thank you. How about you, August? Your experience with win-loss and maybe a lesson or two learned along the way.
Yeah. So win-loss, the return on the investment is really significant, and I think Mimi's example for the program at HubSpot really bears that out, and I would absolutely validate that based on win-loss that I've done in my time at British Telecom and Verizon, and that we're doing here at Deltek as well. The investment, both in time or money, can be really quite significant. So it's really quite telling that the return, the insight that comes from that investment is so is so valuable. But to say that sometimes it takes a while to convince the business to let you pursue that nirvana state, as Mimi described it, and that's really a third party, so truly objective, and preferably somebody who specializes in doing win-loss interviews, because it is a specialty. Some people do it well, some people do not. But that third party is going and they're talking to your losses, your wins, and your no decisions if you decide to extend the aperture that broadly. In a lot of instances, I'd really strongly recommend you speak to no decisions as well, just to put that out there. And the examples that Mimi gave of some of the work that she's doing at Akamai with the Salesforce data and conducting analysis and doing internal interviews are really valuable ways to get started on Winloss and kind of get your stakeholders a little bit hungry for the insights that could be available if they make that investment. Now, the investment of your time is still going to be really significant. So stakeholders need to understand there is an opportunity cost associated with us taking this internal approach to win-loss. But if, for example, in an enterprise-oriented organization, just to say that, really quickly, getting the perspective of the account executive, the bid manager, maybe a solutions engineer, and a couple of other stakeholders, you will get that Rashomon effect of, what the what the AE saw was not exactly what the bid manager saw, was not exactly what the solutions engineer saw, and you'll get a much greater idea of systematically what really is working inside of your business, even with those internal interviews.
So what I'm hearing for folks here who are dying to get started with Winloss, they know the value and they just don't know where to start. It sounds like first and foremost, maybe adjust your expectations. Like this is a marathon, not a sprint. And also, you're gonna maybe some of you have executive leaders who love Winloss, but let's assume that's not the case. You're going to have to build a business case for this. And it sounds like one of the best things to do there is just start where you can, right? Maybe with the Salesforce data in the internal interviews with your sales reps, the account managers, bid managers, whoever it may be. Don't expect to all of a sudden get a ton of insight from your buyers themselves. Do what you can internally. Use that to start building a business case. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, and I would add to that, it will make some of the stakeholders that are sometimes skeptical of Winloss or maybe a little wary of it. And I'm thinking here particularly about sellers that feel like, hey, is this an exercise to kind of like rat me out? For them to recognize, actually, this is a systematic analysis of the organization's effectiveness at selling and winning in the market.
Definitely. Sheila, it looks like we've had some questions come in. Are any questions on win-loss that we can throw to August and Mimi here?
The first question, actually, there's two I'm going to kind of combine from Marina and Kevin. Any best practices that you can share for these programs on how to get customers to participate and actually get them to do the interviews, especially maybe with churned customers? Like, how are you going to get their thoughts on why they potentially didn't renew? So I'll pass that to August first.
Oh, okay. That's a really good and a very difficult question. We've been all over the place, and just like Mimi's experience, particularly on the enterprise side, getting customers to respond has been more difficult. I will say, at least in my experience, small and medium business customers are much more likely to respond to an inquiry. Much more likely to be responsive to if you or your partner if you've got a partner that's doing the interviews is offering any sort of incentive with that. And sometimes that comes into the cost of of that holy grail win-loss program, as well as some sort of charitable donation or maybe a gift card for participating in the win-loss interview. More often than not, our outreach, absent some form of compensation, is really based on the premise that we're trying to be better. And for a churned customer, we understand we did not serve you well in that instance, and or you've not perceived us as having served you well. We would like to understand more about that. And in my experience, and Mimi, I'd love your perspective on this. Customers, particularly if they're maybe a little bit not thrilled with you, would appreciate the opportunity in a safe place, in a psychologically safe space, to tell you why they're not happy with you.
No, absolutely. And that's why having a third party conduct the interviews also tends to increase the accept rate, because they know that they can be truly honest, and that third party is not it's not a seller. They're not trying to pitch them, right? Anything in this follow-up conversation, it is truly to learn. But I understand that there's a cost associated with hiring an outside party. But I agree 100% with August. We use the same kind of phrases of like, we didn't serve you the way that we wanted to. We want to reach out and learn what we could have done better to help us improve. An incentive is important. It doesn't have to be a $300, $500 incentive. A small amount, I think, is very much something you can swing, and it does make a difference in terms of, again, increasing the acceptance rate. Having an executive sponsor also is important, if it only in name, both at HubSpot and at Akamai. Even though the Akamai experience wasn't quite as successful, we had the emails that we sent out to the churned customers all came from our EVPs or the CEO, where it was a message directly from them, saying that we were trying to improve, and we were looking for feedback, nothing else, versus someone like myself or anyone else, emailing. The weight of it is not quite as high. It is what it is. All of those components help improve, right, your acceptance rate.
Awesome. Thank you both. We have another question that came in from Neil, who's also doing win-loss analysis based on CRM data, as well as customer interviews, and would love to know more about how to maximize the return on investment for this kind of work. So I'll pass that to Mimi, because I know you had mentioned the CRM data, but yeah, how to just get, I guess, the most out of this type of work.
I think it's most effective when it's tied to a business objective, right? If there's a major launch of something and you need that information, that's where you should be focusing on, instead of like, let's just anyone on anything, let's ask them the questions. So even with that approach, you can get some answers, but the more focused it is and the more it's tied to what executives are really thinking about, the more successful it will be, for sure. ROI is kind of tied to whether or not you can influence or impact the business. So one of the more particularly effective kind of, I would say, quasi win-loss research streams that we had at HubSpot was on differentiation, and what we said we were good at versus our competitors. And so it was actually a mixed research model where we had customers of ours reinforce whether or not our differentiation was all that different. And we also interviewed users of our competition and asked them the same questions. And the data that came back, which we presented to leadership, was our competitors are using exact same differentiation as we do, and their customers feel exactly the same way about them that ours do about us. That's a problem, right? If everyone feels the same way, it's not differentiation. So I know that was a particularly effective research stream because it was top of mind for our leaders as we were trying to evolve the business. So where there's a hot topic, tie your win-loss, tie your research to those pieces.
Awesome. Anything you would add to that, August?
Yeah, I love that idea of reinforcing and revalidating or correcting your assumption about differentiation themes as being a great area of focusing your win-loss activity. And picking up Mimi's point about aligning with other things that you're seeing in the business, to the extent that you can align your win-loss with any strategic objectives that the business may have. If there are strategic priorities or initiatives that are clearly articulated by your leadership team, the opportunity to shed insight into those through win-loss is a great way to demonstrate the value and get that return on the investment.
I have one more question in this section before we move on, Connor. This is sort of related to balancing quantitative and qualitative information that can come through. So August, I'll pass this over to you first. When you're doing, win-loss, how do you sort of focus on sort of only quantitative, or how do you strike that balance and looking at the depth of qualitative as well?
Right. Well, I've always been a fan of the hybrid research model that Mimi was talking about a moment ago. That does mix qualitative and quantitative, and that can always be a little bit fraught. Sometimes you've got stakeholders that really prefer one versus the other. Very finance-minded people really like the quantitative. People from marketing and other functions tend to like much more of the qualitative. But I find by mixing the two, you can really scratch everyone's itch in terms of the insights that you're bringing back. And and some insights are very qualitative in nature, for example, and particularly in a business that a B2B setting, you really don't have enough at bats sometimes to really go deep in quantitative. If you were fully quantitative, you might look at a situation and say, oh, our win rate against this competitor is really improving. Well, you might just be more aware of where you're coming up against this competitor in the market and marking that, capturing that in the CRM data more. So if you go purely quantitative, you might take yourself down a path where the law of small numbers is working against you, and qualitative insights are a great way to make sure you don't over-index on that.
I think we're good for questions for now, Connor.
Cool. Thank you, Sheila. We will move on to our third insight from the state of CI. This is a lot, so I'll explain here. So in our survey of CI leaders, we gave them this list of whatever it is, 10 or 11 sources of competitive intelligence, places where you get or people from whom you get competitive intelligence. And we asked everyone, for each of these, can you please tell us if you think this source is extremely valuable, valuable, somewhat valuable, or not valuable at all? And then, as you can see, we've ranked them here. So employees and coworkers was the source of CI that was called extremely valuable by the highest share of CI leaders. So 63% of CI leaders told us that the intel they get from their coworkers is extremely valuable. So I think it's safe to assume that almost everyone on this call wants to get more intel from their coworkers, especially those in the field and in sales and customer success. So we'll start with you here, Mimi. We'd love to know if you have any tips for the folks in the audience about sourcing this intelligence from the field, from the front line.
Yeah, and my tip ties into kind of the first talking point that we had, which is kind of, roadshow, be in front of the sellers and the product folks and, all of the stakeholders that you have, because the more that you have are top of mind, the more likely they will be to think, oh, Mimi's team probably would like to see this, right? This is the hard work of influence. It's not just the CI job, it's almost everyone's job, right? If you have to work with other teams and get information from other teams, what's the best way to engage and create those relationships? So I think one of the first pieces when we first discussed this was, I think it'll be difficult to expect all of the insights and all the informations without putting in that hard work, right? Of showing your stakeholders that your team is responsible for enablement materials, for competitive intelligence, for battle cards, or what have you, right? I think when you show up with the assets that your stakeholders need, then again, that creates that goodwill, that relationship where it comes back to you. I think expecting that from the beginning, it's just going to be harder, much, much harder. I agree with the data. I agree with probably everyone in this space. Getting information from the field is the most helpful in shoring up what you know about your competitors. But that is a long-term relationship play, I think, more than anything else.
How about you, August?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Mimi's comments that it is a long-term relationship play, and you do have to demonstrate that value. There can be a little bit of that chicken and egg if the competitive intelligence function is new. That how do you demonstrate the value of your insights if one of the most, if not the most important source of your insights is not providing you those insights yet? So that's maybe something where you lean into the other sources where you can demonstrate some of that value initially, and then to Mimi's point about being front of mind with these different stakeholders and showing up with the assets, they say like, oh, this is what this goes into. People will share insight and they'll take that investment in their own time to do that if they can see that that's going to deliver value back for them or for the business as well. Another thing too is, we talked earlier about over-indexing on communication. One of the things I think here is over-indexing on praise a little bit as well. So, particularly the teams that are bringing really valuable or important insights, to the extent that they're comfortable and your corporate culture is comfortable having that highlighted, find a venue where you can do that. So another thing we do, I mentioned that monthly call that my team and I host. When a particular valuable insight comes in from the business, we have a little award ceremony for the person who shared that insight. And that kind of illustrates like, hey, we will recognize what good looks like here. And, if you bring us something really good, we will share those kudos with you.
So I'm here a couple of things. First of all, so field intelligence, it sounds like Winloss, it is a marathon, not a sprint, right? You have to, like I said, do what you can at first. Don't reset your expectations. Don't expect to, launch your CI program, then just get overwhelmed by all this amazing intelligence from the field. So make that change in your expectations. And like with Winloss, where you're just do what you can at first, build the case, build that trust. And the other thing I'm hearing is, and Mimi, you called this out, this insight ties in nicely with the first one that we discussed. If there's one action so far for everyone here on this call, it's look at your sales team's calendars, see where they have those standing meetings. Maybe there's a daily stand-up or weekly, whatever. And if you don't already go and advocate for yourself to get on the agenda periodically, because that will it's a two-bird situation, right? That'll help drive that drive that adoption of the materials you're creating, and also you'll start creating that feedback loop of intel back to yourself, right? And 3 birds, I don't want to get too crazy here, but also as you're building that trust, that'll help you with those internal win-loss interviews, right? Get in front of your sales team, advocate for yourself, because no one else is going to, at least at first, right? Sheila, do we have any questions on field intelligence before we move on?
We have one question that I think is helpful from Chris. Just the best way to get this information from folks at your organization, or from AEs and SEs specifically, like Slack channel, like how do you both get this information for your programs?
So we've, communicated out the different ways we can receive this information. We highlighted the add new intel button on Crayon, and we bring that up every time we talk about that particular tool. The reality is sellers in particular, but any stakeholder, they'll go to their tool of least resistance. So they'll go to email, or in our case, Teams. If you're on Slack instead, they'll go to Slack. They'll do what they feel most comfortable with. And quite honestly, from our perspective, you've got to be open to receiving field intel from any channel.
Yep, absolutely. It doesn't matter if it's, a direct email to me or the distro list, or I do every now and then, I go into Crayon, I do see something that got uploaded. So you just kind of have to reinforce all of the avenues that your field can share information with you, and just let them know that you're monitoring it. That's a gift, right? So definitely accept it, regardless of where it comes from or where it gets posted.
It sounds like maybe the slightly coy answer to Chris's question is, however your sales reps and your AEs and SEs, however they want to submit field intel, that's how you're going to accept field intel, because whether you want folks to use the content you create for them or get intel from them, it's got to be easy, right? It has to be as painless as possible.
And to echo one of August's points, which is giving kudos, right? One of the most powerful things that we've done, and again, it hasn't created a tsunami, right, of insights or field intelligence, is when we do get a pricing sheet, right, or an RFP quote or something like that, we share it with the places that people care about competitive. And we say so-and-so person should, and then folks kind of, oh, well, in my inbox, I got probably 4 or 5 of these, right? I can forward them along, like reinforcing that behavior in multiple different ways. That's how you kind of help people understand the art of the possible with CI, right? Because if they don't know what actually matters, then it's going to be really hard for folks to gauge whether or not it was something worth sending, right, at the end of the day.
Nice, thanks. I have another question about how is third-party independent intelligence viewed, not bespoke? I don't know if that's enough to go on.
I've assumed it's some stuff like Gartner 451, Forrester Research, very positively viewed, at least in my organization. It's third-party, it's reputable. Obviously, we use a lot of that kind of research to reinforce our positioning, because it's not us saying that we're great. It's an independent kind of research group verifying that. So that's actually one of the mandates for my team from my leader, which is to bring more of that market perspective in, because we are insular. We talk about ourselves, we care about ourselves, we think only about ourselves, right? And we might miss some of the larger trends. And so that is a component of what we bring into the business, but it's not necessarily something we share a lot with reps because they just want to sell. That's actually more on go-to-market product, right? Those are the teams that our leadership, they care about that type of information.
I think sellers care about that information when it's a proof point that validates the positioning, to your point, Mimi. And so, if we're talking about like a Gartner Magic Quadrant, for example, just give me the quadrant. I definitely don't want the report, but I want the quadrant where we're in the upper right. And then, to Mimi's point too, the whether it's the product organization or product marketing or some other part of the business will be much more interested in going into the depth of that report.
Thank you both. I think that's good for now, Connor. We can move to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheila. So this is a fun one. This is one of my favorites from the new State of CI report. So like I said, we surveyed both CI leaders and stakeholders. So one of the questions that we asked the stakeholders who took our survey is, do you get ad hoc support from your CI team? Or in other words, do you get help with one-off requests? And folks answered yes or no. And then a subsequent question was, do you trust the insights that you get from your CI point person or team? And every single stakeholder who said they do get ad hoc support said, yes, I trust the insights I get from my CI team. And as you can see, the stakeholders who do not get that ad hoc support, well, just over half of them said that they trust the insights they get from their CI team. So this seems to suggest that one of the keys to earning the trust of your stakeholders is finding ways to support them on that ad hoc basis. So I'm curious, and August, we'll start with you if you don't mind. What are some tips you have for folks when it comes to supporting stakeholders on an ad hoc basis without just, responding to every single thing that everyone wants, right?
Yeah, because you've got to fit this in. When you think about the typical competitive intelligence portfolio, there are long-term activities, really significant projects. There's a lot of recurring work that you've got to have capacity for. If you're doing win-loss, that's burning up a lot of cycles on a monthly or a quarterly basis. That's not available for these sorts of projects. The two main things, pieces of advice I would offer for a CI team that's trying to figure out how we can best support ad hoc requests. The first thing I would say is recognize the request as a general statement of a need. So one of the things that I've observed is very often ad hoc requests come in the form of a specific research path that the stakeholder would like me or the team to undertake. And how I address that is first recognize that almost like I'm a consultant, and I would say, okay, it sounds like you've got a really interesting need there. There's an important decision that you're trying to make. Could you tell me a little bit about that? And apply some of those competitive intelligence solicitation skills back on our stakeholders to understand what it is, what they really need. Because the original statement is a want that hides the need, and it's your job to kind of find the need. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I would say is to always remember that you have superpowers, that the ad hoc request that once you've identified the need is something you will be able to address in 2 to 4 hours, and maybe time boxing how much time, based on how much time you have available to execute on this, you will be able to deliver with your skills and your expertise and your knowledge so much more than the stakeholder was ever going to be able to get on their own. And even if it doesn't completely answer the mail, you'll elicit some really great feedback on what the larger need is as well. And sometimes I think CI professionals, because we do have that analytical mindset, kind of feel like every request I have to do exactly what they asked me to do. And if it's like a 20-week engagement, that occupies all my time, well, I guess that's my life now, basically. And to say, well, you could probably do a lot for them if you took time to understand their need and time box a certain amount of time, and recognize your own superpower within that small amount of time, much more than you might think you can do.
Thank you. What do you think, Mimi?
August so elegantly wrapped up some of what we experience in a much kinder way, which is sometimes we get these requests from reps, and we're like, what are you asking? You want us to boil the ocean, right? So getting really specific and engaging and clarifying, well, why, right? Usually, most of the time, there's a very specific thing they're looking for. They just choose not to tell us, right? Until a couple of cycles. But oftentimes it is a very reasonable request. If folks on the call are trying to understand or figure out how to balance all of the requests that come to the organization, the way that we've done it is through kind of tiering of requests. So you can imagine we have a lot of reps, we have a lot of products, we have a lot of competitors, and we just can't address them all. So we push folks to a form where the questions we typically ask over and over again, we put that in there to get them to give us that detail in advance. And we also tie it to deal value, right? The higher the deal value, the more likely we will make time to address it, because we know it's going to be much more impactful to the business. We also make it really clear that the way that our team is organized is through a top tier competitors, then tier 2, 3, 3 and 4 and so on. Again, it's based on revenue impact. And so if a request is for a competitor that's lower down, that's why we would potentially, reject, right, a request, and we give the validation why. But that's the ad hoc sales side, which is always part of a CI program's kind of remit. You have to help sales, but this is the way that we organize it. There's another component of ad hoc request that we discussed, which is the strategic stuff that comes from leadership and from product teams. And those are the ones we want to grab onto, because at least for Akamai, we started with winning over the sales team, making sure that they were satisfied so that we could take that goodwill and start making those inroads, right, with the product teams and the leadership teams. So the more, as you see from this data, you actually get in front of those teams and show, right, what your team's capable of, the more buy-in that you get. So we do kind of grab on to those strategic requests. Sometimes they're really hairy, they're really difficult. So we try to set expectations, but those are the ones we look forward to because it helps kind of elevate the group in the business.
I think,
yeah, absolutely concur. I'm sorry, Connor, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did want to say absolutely concur with Mimi's perspective on particularly those more strategic ad hoc requests. And I might have been polite and diplomatic, but the language in my mind around those requests is very different.
I heard you.
So yeah, I feel heard and I feel seen. Thank you, Mimi.
I think your point about the tiering, Mimi, right? Having a system for tiering is super impressive, and that should definitely be everyone on the call's North Star. Before you get there, I think this insight really drives home the importance of goals, right? Of having just some kind of purpose for your CI program, because in the absence of a purpose or a goal or an objective, it's so easy, I think, to just find yourself constantly fighting fires and responding to ad hoc requests. Whereas just a nice simple filter is if you have a goal, at least that can help you monitor what's coming in and say, okay, if I execute on this, will I be working towards my goal or not? Right? Just at the most baseline level of having a filter for those things, right? The other thing I'm hearing, and Sheila, just for the sake of time, I am gonna ask that we hold off on audience questions until we get through the next slide. But another thing I'm hearing is that earlier we talked about how sometimes CI folks need to act like marketers, right? In over communicating and getting out the value of CI. What I heard both of you say is that CI folks also need to think like sellers sometimes, right? Doing that discovery, especially for product marketers on the phone. If you were listening to a call recording with one of your sellers and you could tell that the buyer was saying they want something but not getting to the need, you would want your seller to do that discovery, right? And really uncover the need underlying the request. I think CI folks need to do the same thing, right? Do that discovery with your stakeholders. Okay.
Yeah, Connor, I know we're, just real quick, I'm thrilled that you used the word discovery, because we actually recently translated our project charter to a discovery document. And
nice.
what we found is when we reoriented this around sales language, that stakeholders that were coming with ad hoc requests were much more interested in engaging with us, because then they understood it in the context of their day-to-day job or in terms of the organizational process as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, gotta be curious. Last, we will have a few minutes, I think, for any additional audience questions. But the last insight, and this ties in with the idea of goals and tiering and filtering ad hoc requests. One of the questions we've been asking since the very first year of the State of CI, since 2018, we've been asking folks if they have key performance indicators defined for their CI program. And in 2018, 16% of CI leaders said yes. And this year, 36% of CI leaders said yes. So that is a 125% increase, since 2018. So folks are getting better and better at measuring the impact of competitive intelligence. So Mimi, we'll start with you if that's okay. I'm curious, for folks on the phone who do not have KPIs for their CI program, any advice you have for those folks to get started?
Yeah, I mean, start simple, and our KPIs, frankly, are very, very simple too. At least at this, we're about 2 years into the journey here at Akamai. So a couple of KPIs, some are hard numbers and others are a little bit more aspirational. The hard numbers is number of battle cards, right? We started with technically 0. There were existing battle cards that predated my arrival that we converted, but we wanted to have a good baseline. Again, using the tiers, we wanted the tier 1 competitors covered, and over time we will build more, right, to address all of the others. So that's one KPI that is part of my team's objectives that goes all the way up to CMO. Another is winning more competitive deals. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It can be difficult depending on your systems to actually measure win rates, but I think we're using more of a qualitative, like, are we doing a good job? Are we getting good feedback versus pure measurements? I think once we get to a point where we can actually get those numbers, that would be great. We're just not there yet. And then it's about expanding the influence of the team, which is, not numbers based, but important as we try to move out of pure sales enablement to some more of that strategic work that honestly is the most interesting. And I think what we all get a kick out of doing.
Thank you. How about you, August? Any advice for folks who are hoping to establish some KPIs?
Yeah, Mimi has some great advice on keeping it simple, and those are really fantastic examples. An additional dimension I'll mention that we've tried to follow is to align our KPIs with basically input to the KPIs against which our stakeholders are going to be measured. So things like win rates, which are difficult to get, win rates against particular competitors. We know for a fact that our reps are almost 50% more likely to win an opportunity when they name a competitor or an incumbent. So getting them to come through that activity and demonstrate that, that knowledge of the opportunity that they're trying to sell against is also a factor, because it reflects how effective have we been at conveying that as an important part of the pursuit opportunity. And then also, is that behavior that we know translates into more wins, is that behavior being adopted in the business?
Gotcha. So I think for the folks on the call who are starting from zero, I think it's really important to take away from this that there's to start defining KPIs for your CI program. You don't need any budget. You don't need a tool. Of course, these things are good, but what are you producing? How many battle cards are you producing, and on which competitors? Are you getting good feedback from your sales team? These are perfectly acceptable ways to measure success. And the theme throughout this conversation, right, is it's all a marathon, not a sprint. So you have to think about it like a process, incremental process, where you're starting with what you can and using that to build to bigger and better things. So thank you both so much for walking through these insights with us. Again, we will shout out in just a few minutes the State of CI reports. You all know where to get it. Because that's where all these insights came from. So if you enjoyed these 5 insights, there's a lot more in the report. We have 8 minutes left. So Sheila, on the topic of building trust with stakeholders, getting adoption, getting more field intel, KPIs, anything we've discussed so far, are there any lingering questions from the audience?
Yeah, there's a few good ones we can talk through. We had one question that sort of ties 2 of these key stats together, one around ad hoc support and measurement. So I don't know if either of you have a best practice metric or how you measure just the amount of ad hoc support that you are providing to the organization, apart from simply just the number of requests. Mm-hmm. August, do you have a way that you're doing that today?
We're definitely on the journey there. So, to Connor's point about iteration and improvement, we're on this journey of really measuring our ad hoc activity against our recurring or ongoing activities as well. So we are in part measuring that by the number of pursuits. Let's say, roughly the person hours that are associated with those projects, the positive results as a consequence of those projects, and alignment with strategic objectives as well. So taking it back to Mimi's really excellent point about prioritization, one of the hurdles, or one of the lenses through which we look at ad hoc project requests is alignment with strategic objectives as well. And so we are evaluating ourselves based on how well we're supporting each of those.
And I would add, I'm sure my team loved this, but I kind of want to track all of the requests that we get our way, even the ones that we decline, right? Because that proves, again, the value of the team. And I'm sure everyone feels the pain. CI teams are very, very small. And so I can actually then, in a quarterly or annual summary, show my leadership the projects or the requests that we decline due to lack of staff, right? It
Mhm.
usually isn't enough to get things over the line, but it just kind of reinforces the value that your team provides because you're getting all these requests, and two, you don't have the bandwidth, right, to support everyone in the
Mhm.
business. Again, we know that that's not the end goal, but it's just another proof point. So that's one of the beauties of the form is we have every single request, right? And when we do have the MRR value tied to it, we can extrapolate out the value of our assistance and what we can provide to the business. It's a very simple, I think, way to at least keep your team floating, right? If you're trying to figure out ways to prove value to your leadership.
That's a great idea. I'm going to steal that.
Awesome. And then I'm going to conclude with one sort of big question from Casey Ward. Thank you, Casey. I think this is a great one to kind of take us home because it summarizes a few of the things we've been talking about, but all the great work that you're doing, you know, from win-loss insights and competitive updates. What's your cadence for your program in terms of sharing all of this great work with your executive team? And does that differ from the cadence where you're sharing all of, you know, these results with your product or revenue leaders specifically? Mimi, I'll pass that to you.
It is a very different cadence and it's very, very specific. So for our executive team, I do a quarterly summary and it's only stuff that I know that they care about. It's not about how great my program is or how happy we make people or our metrics, because that's not what matters. It's an update on our competitive posture for our two major business lines. So it's 2 updates a quarter. And so that's been getting good traction. And it was not something that I just proactively did. It was over the course of the year, my CMO approached me and said, okay, it's time for you to start doing these executive briefings. So again, don't start out with that intention. You do have to earn it. It's the truth, right? For our product leaders, we're looped in on kind of the regular cadences, the team meetings, the regular projects that we're a part of. We have takeout campaigns, for example, or new go-to-market motions. So our team is involved in that. And so we just kind of plug in naturally. And then, you know, as we discussed with August, like the sales side is a kind of a constant update of like, here's a new piece of a battle card, here's some new insights, here's whatever it is. That is just more in real time because we want to reinforce with those sellers that a group is actively looking after that content and making sure that it's up to date.
It's a very similar situation on our side as well. So, you know, quarterly readouts for our board and our executive team, quarterly readouts for the whole sales organization, and then supplemented, of course, with, like I said, our monthly readout to the whole, you know, to the whole business, and that's geared more towards the rank and file level as opposed to the executive level of insights. But then engagement in those different sales or product team meetings is appropriate as well.
Thank you, Sheila. You're right. And shout out to Casey. Casey contributed to this year's State of Seattle report. So thank you for doing that and for being here, Casey, and asking an awesome question to bring us home. Before I spotlight August and Mimi's LinkedIn's and the report, I'm going to attempt to give you all some action items based on this conversation. So when you leave this call today, make sure first and foremost that you know why you're doing competitive intelligence, which sounds a little silly, but make sure you're crystal clear on the purpose of why you're doing this work, because that's going to help you establish those initial KPIs and start filtering those ad hoc requests. And then from there, make sure you're getting FaceTime regularly with your stakeholders, right? Because that's going to help you drive adoption, start increasing the amount of field intelligence that you get, and you'll start building the trust that you need to start doing some win-loss analysis as well, right? So make sure you know why you're doing this in the first place and start spending an uncomfortable amount of time with your stakeholders. So if you go to crayon.co/state of competitive intelligence or go to our website and it's under the resources tab, you'll find the State of Seattle report, which has all the insights we discussed today and many more, and also a quote from Casey. Thank you again, Casey. And thank you so much again to Mimi and August, both of you. This was so much fun, and we really appreciate you both taking the time out of your day to do this. So if you want to connect with Mimi and August, you can find them on LinkedIn. But that is all we have for today. So thank you everyone for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.